In the guise of a muleteer, no one recognized the heir to Aragon. The Castilian princess also arrived incognito, dressed in a simple black wool gown of her maid and a dark cloak that concealed her hair and face. Not a single soul was to suspect that in Valladolid, Princess Isabella was about to wed Ferdinand of Aragon, the King of Sicily. The bride's brother, the emotionally unstable King Henry IV, was fiercely opposed to this union. Thus, the groom and his betrothed had to resort to a clever ruse. One might wonder, what's the big deal? A prince from one country proposes to a royal lady from another. However, in the mid-15th century, in Castile, this was tantamount to treason. King Henry felt the precariousness of his position. He was unpopular, had no male heirs, and had labeled his only daughter, Juana, a bastard, claiming her mother had conceived her with a handsome courtier. There was no law in Castile prohibiting women from ruling. Henry had a younger sister, Isabella, and in the event of the king's death without heirs, she stood a good chance of inheriting the throne. Just the thought of this was torturous for the king. As a hot-tempered man with moods that shifted rapidly, he often wavered. Sometimes he recognized his daughter's rights, only to tear up documents a month later, declaring that Isabella was his true heir. The silent and serious girl needed to be kept under constant watch, so her brother demanded that she could only marry with his consent. He proposed a suitor from Portugal, 20 years older than the princess. But Isabella refused. She understood that after marriage, she would have to move to Lisbon and find herself in a subordinate position, when a far more enticing prospect loomed ahead, a throne of her own. Villar, a researcher of Isabella's life, noted that despite her scant education, she was prudent, energetic, and eagerly filled the gaps in her knowledge that her teachers were supposed to address. It seems that the mastermind behind this royal ruse was Ferdinand's father, King John II of Aragon. He personally, and through intermediaries, painted a picture for Isabella of the advantages of marrying his son. He assured her that if Henry began to act recklessly, Aragon would muster military forces to help Isabella claim the throne. Moreover, the groom was nearly the same age as the princess and did not repel her with his appearance. Far from it, especially compared to the aging Portuguese suitor. However, the King of Castile soon learned about the negotiations. He recognized the potential of this union and was horrified. Ferdinand and Isabella could become powerful enough to overthrow him. The king pinned all his hopes on Rome. Pope Paul II, the pontiff at the time, was a man of very strict views and would likely disapprove of a marriage between close relatives. When the priest in Valladolid asked the bride and groom for permission to marry, they handed over the document without batting an eye. The archbishop failed to detect the forgery. Yes, that's right. Princess Isabella and Prince Ferdinand, standing before the altar disguised as a shepherd and a maid, had created a fake document from the Pope supposedly granting them permission to wed. The bells rang out. The wedding took place. Upon discovering what had happened, the King of Castile was unable to calm down for a long time. It took 2 years for him to forgive his sister and acknowledge her marriage. However, there was still the matter of obtaining papal approval. Without it, the marriage would remain a mere fiction. Eventually, after some time, the new Pope, Sixtus IV, granted his consent. This was facilitated by a very shrewd and clever man, Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, whom the newlyweds, of course, generously rewarded. There's a saying, "What is meant to be will find a way." The Castilian king wasted so much effort and anxiety trying to keep Isabella from the throne and prevent her marriage. Because after his death and a 5-year civil war with another heiress, Isabella was ultimately proclaimed Queen of Castile. Her husband gained the rights to the throne of Aragon. Together, they laid the foundation for the unification of Spain into a single, indivisible state. Few know that the noble goal of this union was rooted in a true royal ruse.